Introduction. Welcome to Speaking History, friends. History is filled with power-hungry rulers, ambitious generals, and cunning advisors. But what if I told you that some of the most influential figures in history were men who had been stripped of their masculinity? Yes, eunuchs, men who had been castrated, rose to the highest ranks of power in royal courts, empires, and even military forces. They weren't just servants or entertainers. They were kingmakers, political masterminds, and sometimes the true rulers behind the throne. But why would someone go through such a brutal transformation? Was it forced upon them, or did some choose this path willingly? And how did eunuchs, despite their physical disadvantage, become some of the most feared and respected figures in history? This is not just a story of suffering. This is a story of strategy, survival, and shocking influence. In this series, we'll uncover the secret history of eunuchs, from their rise in ancient civilizations to their eventual decline. Stay with us as we explore a hidden chapter of history that will change the way you see power forever. Let's begin. Ancient civilizations and the rise of eunuchs. Imagine a world where your greatest asset in gaining power wasn't your wealth, your bloodline, or even your physical strength, but the fact that you could never have children. Sounds bizarre, right? But for centuries, eunuchs became some of the most powerful figures in the grandest empires of history. From China to the Byzantine Empire, from the Middle East to Europe, eunuchs weren't just survivors of a brutal fate. They were political masterminds who shaped history from behind the scenes. But how did this happen? And why did the world's most powerful rulers trust castrated men over their own flesh and blood? Eunuchs in ancient China. The puppet masters of emperors nowhere were eunuchs more powerful than in imperial China. The Forbidden City wasn't just home to emperors and concubines. It was controlled by thousands of eunuchs, hand-picked to serve the royal family. But these men weren't just silent servants. They manipulated, they schemed, and in many cases they ruled from behind the throne. Take Zheng He, for example, one of the most famous eunuchs in history. Once a slave, he became a powerful admiral, commanding the largest naval fleet the world had ever seen. His voyages expanded China's influence across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And yet he wasn't an emperor or a prince. He was a eunuch. But the power of eunuchs came at a cost. Many emperors feared their influence, leading to brutal purges where thousands were executed overnight. Yet no matter how many were killed, their power never truly faded. The Byzantine Empire, eunuchs as kings without crowns. Meanwhile, in the Byzantine Empire, eunuchs weren't just servants. They were advisors, generals, and even rulers in all but name. The Byzantines believed eunuchs were the perfect officials. They had no children, no family ties, and no reason to betray the empire for personal gain. One of the most notorious Byzantine eunuchs was Narses, a brilliant general who led the empire's armies to victory against the mighty Ostrogoths. Imagine that. A castrated man leading entire armies, strategizing in war rooms, and outmaneuvering some of the fiercest warriors of his time. But power came with risk. Eunuchs often became the targets of jealous nobles and backstabbing royals, and many were exiled or assassinated. Yet their presence in Byzantine politics was undeniable. Eunuchs in the Islamic world, the guardians of power. The Middle East, particularly during the Abbasid and Ottoman empires, saw eunuchs controlling the most private and powerful spaces, the royal harems and the palace courts. These men were the closest confidants of sultans and caliphs, overseeing everything from royal affairs to state security. In the Ottoman Empire, eunuchs controlled the imperial harem, influencing succession battles and court politics. Some, like Kislar Aga, held immense power, advising the sultan and controlling vast amounts of wealth. But make no mistake, being a eunuch wasn't just about servitude. It was about survival in a world where power meant everything. These men, stripped of their ability to have families, dedicated their lives to ambition, loyalty, and at times, ruthless cunning. The rise of the unlikely rulers. So why did these civilizations trust eunuchs so much? The answer is simple. Without families, they had no dynastic ambitions. Kings and emperors saw them as the safest option, men who could be powerful but not a threat to the royal bloodline. But history proves otherwise. Eunuchs weren't just silent witnesses to power, they were architects of empires, kingmakers, and sometimes the true rulers hidden behind palace walls. And their influence wasn't limited to the East. In the next part, we'll explore how eunuchs shaped religion, culture, and even music in ways you'd never expect. Stay tuned. Eunuchs in religion and culture. Throughout history, eunuchs weren't just political players. They were also deeply woven into the religious and cultural fabric of many civilizations. From sacred roles in temples to influencing the world of art and music, eunuchs have left a lasting impact that still echoes today. But how did societies view eunuchs? Were they seen as divine beings, cursed souls, or simply tools for power? Eunuchs in religion, servants of the divine. In many ancient societies, eunuchs were believed to be closer to the divine, untouched by worldly desires. This made them the perfect candidates for religious roles, where celibacy and detachment from earthly pleasures were seen as virtues. Ancient Mesopotamia and Anatolia. The Galli, eunuch priests of the goddess Cybele, played a major role in religious ceremonies. These men underwent self-castration as an act of devotion, believing it brought them closer to the divine. They performed rituals filled with music, dance, and frenzied worship, symbolizing their complete dedication to the goddess. Christianity. While Christianity didn't promote castration, certain biblical references acknowledged eunuchs as figures of devotion. Some early Christian monks saw castration as a way to remove temptation, dedicating their lives to faith. Islam and the Middle East. Eunuchs played key roles in Islamic society, especially as guardians of the holiest sites. In the Ottoman and Abbasid empires, eunuchs were entrusted with safeguarding the Kaaba in Mecca and Al-Masjid an-Nabawi in Medina. Their unique status, having no family ties, was seen as a guarantee of loyalty to their religious duties. The castrati, eunuchs who ruled the world of music. While many eunuchs were warriors and statesmen, some shaped culture in a completely different way, through music. In the 17th and 18th century Europe, the world was captivated by the voices of castrati, men who had been castrated before puberty to preserve their high-pitched angelic singing voices. These singers dominated opera houses and royal courts, performing for kings, queens, and the Pope himself. Their voices were powerful yet delicate, capable of reaching notes no natural male singer could. The most famous castrato, Farinelli, was a celebrity in his time, admired across Europe. His voice was said to be so moving that it could bring people to tears. But behind the fame, there was tragedy. Many young boys were forced into castration for the sake of musical success, and only a few ever made it to stardom. The practice was eventually banned in the 19th century, but the haunting beauty of the castrati voices remains legendary. Eunuchs in mythology and literature. Eunuchs also found their way into myths, stories, and historical accounts, often portrayed as cunning advisors, wise sages, or even tragic figures. In Chinese folklore, eunuchs were both feared and respected, often depicted as powerful but manipulative figures. In Indian culture, the Hijra community, which includes eunuchs, has been part of society for centuries, often associated with blessings and religious ceremonies. In Greek and Roman texts, eunuchs were frequently written about as schemers in royal courts, influencing history from the shadows. From sacred to scandalous, eunuchs were paradoxical figures, sometimes revered, sometimes despised. They were seen as pure yet unnatural, powerful yet vulnerable. Their existence challenged the norms of masculinity and power, making them both valuable and feared. Their influence stretched far beyond politics. They shaped religious practices, performed for royalty, and even inspired some of the world's greatest myths. But as societies changed, so did their fate. In the next part, we'll uncover how eunuchs went from rulers and influencers to relics of the past, and why their decline was inevitable. Power, betrayal, and influence. For centuries, eunuchs were more than just servants. They were kingmakers, power brokers, and silent rulers who shaped the fate of empires. Deprived of traditional family ties, they were often considered the most loyal individuals to rulers. But history tells a different story, one filled with betrayal, manipulation, and ruthless ambition. How did eunuchs, men who had no hope of building dynasties of their own, become some of the most influential figures in history? The shadow rulers. Eunuchs controlling empires. Eunuchs thrived in royal courts across the world, where trust was scarce and loyalty was everything. Rulers relied on them as advisors, administrators, and spies, believing that their inability to bear children made them less likely to seek personal power. But many eunuchs shattered that illusion, rising to dominate governments from behind the throne. China, the eunuch empire. In imperial China, eunuchs wielded enormous power in the Forbidden City, often surpassing even the highest-ranking officials. The Ming dynasty, 1368 to 1644, was notorious for its eunuch-controlled government, where these men manipulated emperors, controlled vast fortunes, and orchestrated political purges. The most famous Chinese eunuch was Zheng He, a naval commander who led massive fleets across the world, expanding China's influence in Southeast Asia, India, and even Africa. But power often breeds enemies. In the later years of the Ming dynasty, resentment against eunuchs reached its peak, leading to brutal purges where thousands were executed. Byzantine Empire, masters of intrigue. The Byzantine court was a hotbed of political plots, and eunuchs were often at the center of these schemes. One of the most infamous figures was Joseph Bringas, a eunuch who ruled as the chief minister of Emperor Romanos II. His web of conspiracies kept him in power until he was eventually overthrown. Eunuchs also played key roles in the military, serving as generals and strategists in wars against the Arabs, Persians, and Western powers. Ottoman Empire, the Black Eunuchs. The Ottoman Empire had two powerful groups of eunuchs, the white eunuchs, who served as administrative officials, and the black eunuchs, who controlled the imperial harem. The head of the black eunuchs, known as the Kızlar Ağası, was one of the most influential figures in the empire. He had direct access to the Sultan and his family, which gave him the power to influence royal successions and assassinations. Some eunuchs, like Haça Mustafa Ağa, acted as power brokers between the Sultan and European diplomats, controlling access to the throne. But with such power came jealousy and paranoia. Many eunuchs were eventually betrayed, imprisoned, or executed by the very rulers they had served. The ultimate betrayals. When eunuchs turned on their masters. Eunuchs were often the most trusted individuals in a king's inner circle. But some used that trust to orchestrate betrayals, coups, and even assassinations. In ancient Persia, eunuchs played a role in the downfall of kings by feeding them false information or plotting their murders. In Rome, eunuchs were involved in imperial assassinations, with some manipulating emperors to secure their own survival. In China, eunuchs became so feared that entire dynasties ordered their mass executions to prevent them from seizing control. These betrayals weren't just about power, they were often acts of revenge. Many eunuchs, having been forcefully castrated and robbed of a normal life, saw manipulation and control as their only path to significance. The high price of power. Despite their influence, eunuchs were often despised by society. Many saw them as unnatural, corrupt, and dangerous, leading to brutal crackdowns against them. In some cases, entire groups of eunuchs were wiped out in an attempt to cleanse the court of their influence. Some eunuchs turned on each other, betraying their allies to survive political purges. As dynasties collapsed, eunuchs often found themselves hunted, exiled, or executed, their power vanishing overnight. The beginning of the end. For centuries, eunuchs played a delicate game of power and survival, influencing empires in ways few could imagine. But as the world modernized, their role began to fade, and the golden age of eunuchs slowly came to an end. In the next part, we'll uncover why eunuchs lost their influence and how society gradually erased their presence from history, the decline of eunuchs' influence. For centuries, eunuchs ruled from the shadows, whispering into the ears of emperors, controlling vast wealth and shaping the course of history. But their dominance was never meant to last. As societies evolved, the very factors that once made eunuchs indispensable became their downfall. How did these once powerful figures vanish from the corridors of power? Let's uncover the dramatic fall of history's most powerful eunuchs. The political backlash, when rulers turned against them. Eunuchs thrived in times of absolute monarchy, where rulers needed loyal servants who wouldn't create dynasties of their own. But as governments became more structured, the unchecked power of eunuchs became a threat rather than an asset. China's Ming dynasty, 1368 to 1644, eunuchs became so powerful that they effectively controlled the empire, leading to massive corruption. The public and scholar officials despised them, blaming them for the empire's decline. When the dynasty collapsed, the new rulers massacred thousands of eunuchs to cleanse the government. Ottoman Empire. By the 19th century, reforms within the empire weakened the power of the harem and the palace eunuchs. The introduction of a modern bureaucracy made them obsolete, and many were exiled or removed from political life. Byzantine Empire. Eunuchs played a key role in Byzantine politics, but as the empire weakened, they became scapegoats for military failures. Their influence faded as emperors relied more on hereditary nobility and military generals. The moment rulers stopped needing eunuchs, their removal became inevitable. Social and cultural changes, the end of castration as a practice. As societies modernized, the practice of castrating young boys for political or religious purposes became morally unacceptable. China, the Qing dynasty, 1644 to 1912, officially abolished the practice of castration, and the last imperial eunuch died in 1996, marking the true end of their influence. Europe, the Catholic Church, once known for castrating young boys to preserve their singing voices in choirs, banned the practice in the 19th century. Ottoman Empire. While eunuchs continued serving in royal courts into the 19th century, their numbers dwindled, and by the time the empire collapsed in the early 20th century, they were a relic of the past. As human rights ideas spread, the very concept of creating eunuchs became unthinkable. Without new recruits, their centuries-old system crumbled. The rise of democracy and the fall of court politics eunuchs thrived in autocratic systems, where rulers surrounded themselves with trusted servants. But as democratic institutions emerged, governments moved away from palace politics to more structured administrations, constitutional monarchies and republics. As kings lost power and parliaments took over, the secretive world of palace eunuchs lost its relevance. Merit-based bureaucracies. Instead of relying on castrated men to run governments, societies moved towards merit-based systems, where officials were chosen based on education and skill rather than blind loyalty. Without absolute rulers protecting their interests, eunuchs had no place in the New World Order. The last eunuchs, a fading legacy. By the 20th century, eunuchs were almost entirely wiped from history. The last known cases were found in China and parts of the Middle East, but their influence was nothing compared to the heights they once reached. Sun Yaoting, the last known imperial eunuch of China, died in 1996. He spent his final years reminiscing about an era long gone. In some isolated regions, eunuchs continued to exist as social outcasts, no longer feared, but pitied. Their centuries of dominance had come to an end, their power erased by modern values, democracy, and shifting social norms. The end of an era. Eunuchs went from being the most powerful men in history to being nearly forgotten. Once rulers of empires, they became relics of a past that no longer fit in the modern world. But their story isn't just one of rise and fall, it's a testament to how power operates. Even those considered weak and incapable can rise to unimaginable heights, but no power lasts forever. In the final part, we'll reflect on the legacy of eunuchs and what their story reveals about human ambition, loyalty, and the ever-changing nature of power. Conclusion. Eunuchs once ruled from the shadows, shaping empires and controlling rulers. Despite their physical loss, they became masters of power, loyalty, and manipulation. But as societies evolved, their influence crumbled. Democracy, changing morals, and new power structures made them obsolete. Their story is a lesson in power. Those who seem powerless can rise to dominance, but no reign lasts forever. Today, eunuchs are a relic of history, but their legacy remains a testament to how power truly works. In the end, strength isn't always about force. It's about knowing when to strike. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Let us know your thoughts. And for more untold stories of history, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.